Mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. How do we like our martial arts? One at a time?
Welcome, everyone, to a not mixed martial arts preview show. Boxing probably doesn't have as good of a chat, but, you know, we persevere. And this is a boxing preview show, so, of course, we had to... Well, I don't remember how I phrased it earlier in the week, but we got the holy trinity of me, José Youngs, hosting the Canelo Charlo preview show. We have New York Ric here to talk all sorts of boxing. Pretty much our Slack channel between me and him is a lot of boxing talk anyway, so we're bringing it to you in a preview show format. And the sole reason that we are 15 minutes late on this preview show, he is from the South, so cut him some slack. They still haven't figured out how analog clocks work. Jed Meshew. And
hi guys,
of course,
my bad. Sorry.
And of course, Casey on the ones and twos. He is actually on site in Las Vegas in the lovely Studio A and B in the MGM. You might recognize it as the old media room for all of our lovely UFC media rooms from pre-T-Mobile. I miss those days. I miss that room. Anyway, we are of course here to talk to Canelo Alvarez and Jermell Charlo. Jermell Charlo, of course, don't confuse him with his brother. Charlo going up 2 weight classes. Unheard of. That has been a mixed bag of results for people that have gone up. Of course, obviously Roy Jones, Pacquiao, Tommy Earns, Michael Spinks obviously all had great success. Then you have guys like, Amir Khan, Mikey Garcia, Kell Brook. Didn't really work out for them. We will get into that later on, but I'm going to start with you, Eric. We chatted a little bit of it before we went live, and you are, of course, one of our main correspondents in terms of the social aspect of MMA fighting. So I'm curious, what has been... There's no UFC this week, so we really do get to concentrate on and focus on the boxing part of the combat sports world, especially Canelo, who is one of, if not the biggest draws in all of boxing. What has been the social chatter and the excitement level that you've seen in the internet leading up to this? What I think is still a big fight, but what have you seen from the rest of the world?
Yeah, it's a really fair question. I have to admit, I feel like this hasn't traveled beyond the boxing world. Like, we typically at MMA Fighting see, for some of these bigger fights, a lot of buzz and a lot of traction and MMA fans kind of coming into the tent for these big boxing events. And I have seen some replies that are just like, I didn't even know this was happening. I've seen a lack of kind of interest in replies. So this to me feels like a boxing fight, and it doesn't seem to have the kind of crossover appeal that some of the other big boxing fights that we've seen recently kind of have, which I don't know if that's good or bad. Like from a boxing fight perspective, I don't think that necessarily getting MMA fans interested or even like wider mainstream fans interested is necessarily important or significant. But it does speak to the idea that I think this lands firmly in the boxing realm and isn't traveling beyond, at least from what I'm on social.
Before I kick over to Jed, I do want to ask one more thing for you, Eric. Historically, Mexican Independence Day has been the big date in boxing, Cinco de Mayo, and then Mexican Independence Day. Floyd Mayweather kind of claims that date, and then when he, quote unquote, retired for whatever time he was, Canelo kind of took that mantle and ran with it. Now, the UFC had their big event at the T-Mobile Arena on Mexican Independence Day, and a lot of people were wondered, well, that's usually Canelo's date. Would he go to the MGM? Would they hold both in the same weekend? Wasn't the case. 2 weeks later, Canelo's fighting. Do you think that has something to do with it? That people were just kind of programmed to schedule their boxing around Mexican Independence Day, or is it just like Canelo, Jermell Charlo just isn't as interesting as, say, the Ryan Garcias, the Tank Davises, the Spence Crawfords of the world?
I think you hit on it with your later points, and I think it's more correlation than causation. I think that this is just not as significant a fight in that space. This is just not something that fans have been able to kind of follow the narrative on. And I think therefore the idea that Canelo was not fighting on Mexican Independence Day kind of became like, yeah, we're just not going to do that this time, which is a bit of a weird thing to have happen when tradition is tradition. And And I think that those two things are related in that sense, that I think that this may not have been the fight where they would have said, we have to do it on this date. We've programmed people and they've done a really good job of it. And you need to come see this, to the point where it's like, it's okay if we're not, we're close enough around it. And hopefully people will still tune in for Canelo. So yeah, I think there's a relationship there. I think there's something going on there, but I don't think that that's the major cause of it. I think it's more on the back of how compelling people, or the lack of compelling nature, how people find this fight.
And Jed, for you admittedly, you don't follow boxing as nearly as you do with in the mixed martial arts world. When we do these preview shows, you do a great job of researching and watching tape and all that stuff. But I'm curious, from someone that, I'm not saying you're on the outside of the boxing world, but not as invested in the boxing world, where does this, what is the interest what is the interest level for you in Canelo, Charlo, compared to like all these other massive fights that we've had? That, like, when Crawford Spence was announced, that was a fight that we had been talking about for years. They just announced Fury and Usyk are going to fight. Not sold on, but we did just arrest a guy that was involved in Tupac's shooting. So crazier things have happened in the last 10 minutes than Fury Usyk being announced. So I'm curious, Jed, for you, what is the excitement level for you for Canelo Charlo?
Well, let's just put this out there. Fury Usyk, I mean, if Francis does the thing, does Fury Usyk happen? I don't know. We're just gonna throw that out there. We can move on. Look, this isn't as big as Spence Crawford, because again, casual boxing fan. Are there 3 bigger fights in boxing that could have been made at the time? Like, no, like that's like the biggest fight that could have been made. That's a fight that, a casual fan like myself was like, hey, I thought about that fight for a long time. That seems dope. Great. Let's do that. This is not that. And I think you touched on it at the beginning, saying, you've got Jermell coming up 2 weight classes. Jermell probably would have made more sense, just because I think he competes, a little bit higher up. But this fight's still dope, particularly once I got into it. I think one of the big points for why it maybe isn't transcending, and certainly a part for me, is I knew who the Charlo brothers were. They were not a big part of my experience. I think I'd seen them both fight a couple of times, but they aren't the big stars of the sport. And so the idea of the Charlos is moving up 2 weight classes to fight Canelo is less broadly appealing than, hey, Canelo is trying to pursue another title at light heavyweight or whatever. He's the one taking the quote unquote risk of moving up a weight class. And so I think that knocks a little bit. But then you get into it and it's like, well, Jermell Charlo's really freaking good at fighting. He's a really fun fighter too. It's not just that he's good. You watch him, his fights are compelling and interesting. And, we'll get into this matchup and what goes on here, but this was not a fight that jumped off the page to me as oh, this is great. But as I got more into it, went back and watched some of their fights and sort of recognized the totality of what's going on here, I was like, hell yeah, this fight's going to rule. I'm really excited to watch it.
Going off of that, Eric, I kind of touched upon it a bit, but and Jed mentioned it. Charlo is going up 2 weight classes. Like I said, historically, it's a mixed bag. But if he wins, he can become the undisputed champion of another weight class, like a massive one, and he would join Terrence Crawford and Clarissa Shields as the only fighters to be undisputed in the 4-belt era. Right now, those are the 2 best fighters in their gender. I don't think it's an argument that Clarissa Shields is the best female boxer, and it's not an argument. Well, it is an argument. I'll listen to your arguments to say Terrence Crawford is or is not the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. I think we can all agree he is.
This Inoue.
That's fine. I can listen to the Inoues. I can listen to the Usyks, but Crawford seems to be the vast majority. People think that he is the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. So when they announced it was this Charlo brother going up 2 weight classes to challenge Canelo, Eric, what was your reaction?
It made sense. I get that the momentum was toward the other brother, but this made a lot of sense to me. I think he's game. I think he's viable, and I on it, obviously the size is going to be a huge factor, and that's kind of been the story of the build to this fight. A lot of people I feel like there's very established narratives that we can get into later around this fight that the public and pundits seem to be gravitating toward, and they're pretty static. They're not dynamic at all. They're kind of just like, size is going to be the factor. Is Canelo diminished? And they kind of return to one of those two camps. I really don't think size is going to be as huge a consideration in this fight. It's certainly going to be something, and certainly the idea that Canelo has been fighting at a higher weight for a longer time and fighting top level competition is not something that you dismiss outright. I understand why it's a narrative, but I'm not particularly concerned. I don't think that this fight will come down to exclusively size. Now, we certainly, coming from our background where MMA is kind of our bread and butter, we certainly do see size being significant just because of the difference in the weights of each weight class. Where in MMA they are huge, and when you are going up in weight, you are really taking a major risk. In boxing, obviously, we've seen people climb the weight classes more readily just because of the lack of gap between weight classes. But to your point, it doesn't always happen successfully. It's very difficult to fight at a high level at many different weight classes in boxing. And we've seen some people do it very, very successfully, and we've seen many more kind of not do it successfully. So it will be a factor, but I don't think this will be the difference in the fight, if that makes sense. I think there's a lot of other things that I would point to first before I point to the difference in size between Charlo and Canelo. I think that point has kind of been almost like overestimated in its significance, and I'm curious if you guys agree with that.
I agree to an
don't
extent,
think I agree with you.
For those unaware, like in box, the two weight class jump is Charles going from 154 to 168. He is not. He cuts a lot of
Basically
weight
an MMA
to get to
weight class
154. Yes, essentially, essentially going from lightweight to welterweight. He is not the. He's a big 154 like pound fight. He's a big super welterweight, or whatever weight class it is, super welterweight, light middleweight, whatever anyone wants to call it. He might, because Charlo might be from a smaller weight class, but he has a 3-inch reach advantage against Canelo. It's strange.
Yeah,
he cuts
everyone does.
He cuts a lot of. Yes,
Canelo hasn't had like a height and reach advantage in 10 years.
Right.
He's tiny, man.
And outside of Bivol, he's historically done pretty well against fighters that are bigger than him. So, Jed, I'm going to ask with you, I want you to elaborate this whole size difference, Charlo coming up 2 weight classes or 1 MMA weight class. Are you with Eric? Are we looking too much into that? What is your take on the size difference?
I think that there's absolutely a world where Eric's correct, because again, and Charlo does cut some weight. He is not a small, dimensionally not small for the weight class at all, and will have a height advantage. But we've never seen it, and I think that I have a very my biggest question in this fight is less about, hey, is Canelo diminished? Because I think that story has been maybe a touch overblown. It might be true, but we can get into that. But it's, hey, you're going up 2 weight classes, and a lot of your game, like a lot of what I've seen from Charlo, very, very good, obviously, but he gets a ton of mileage out of just hitting the shit out of people. And I don't know how that's going to translate against, up 2 weight classes, particularly up against a guy in Canelo who has fought monstrous hitters in weight classes above this even. And conversely, at the same time, you watch Charlo fight, and he's not opposed to getting hit himself. Can get a little loose with it in there, and Canelo, that dude, that dude puts the hands on people in a very serious way. And if you're talking about a guy who is naturally bigger, and a big puncher up weight classes even, I think that there is very much a world where Charlo maybe thinks he can get away with more than he really can, or he just gets hit and it just matters more because it's a 14-pound weight jump. And, I am largely the guy who doesn't think that weight matters as much as people put on it in MMA, but the argument in MMA is always, dude, it's 15 pounds. That is a huge gap. And you can see that. And I think that I would say it's more likely than not that is a fairly major factor in this fight.
Yeah, and let's not forget, I mentioned it in the beginning, Amir Khan went up 2 weight classes to fight Canelo, and that dude's still asleep from that fight, from whenever that was. But one of the other narratives, besides one of
tough.
that's putting it
Amir's
mildly.
been stopped a few times, yeah.
Yes, and so it gets literally like the best of the best too. I don't want to knock Amir Khan too much, but Eric, another big narrative of this outside of the weight difference is Charlo catching Canelo at the right time? Because like I said, like when Broner fought Malignaggi, when Spinks fought Larry Holmes, they were going up in weight, but Malignaggi and Larry Holmes were. I'm not using the phrase washed because they're two of the best, like especially Larry Holmes. I think he's the most underrated heavyweight that's ever fought. They were not in their prime anymore, and they were very clearly on the decline or on the last legs of their career. Now, I'm not saying Canelo is on the last legs of his career, but the phrase, is he fading? Is he still the best? Those are questions that I've seen brought up a lot, specifically for this fight. So I'm asking, is this the right time? Is Charlo catching Canelo on the decline? Or is Canelo's best days still ahead of him?
It's so funny because those are kind of the two prevalent narratives, and that's the one that I actually think is more significant. Jed, kind of pointed to the weight, and I said I don't think that's significant. I think it's actually this narrative that has kind of been talked about and seems to be prevailing on the Canelo side of it that I do wonder about. I really like boxing is an unforgiving sport. This man has been chasing like greatness for a very long time, fighting guys bigger than himself, and doing things that very few can do or are even capable of doing, and he's been able to accomplish that. There's a toll for that. There is a wear and tear that happens, and all of a sudden it can start to show. And I got to be honest, I've been looking at his last couple performances, and there's part of me that says, because of the size, because of what he's attempting to do, I'm willing to forgive. And there's part of me that said, like, in the later rounds, like, he just did not look that good. And I do expect, if he can't finish Charlo, that Charlo will be there in the later rounds and can potentially take advantage of this. Now, that's assuming that is operating under the assumption that there is a diminishment, that there is a fading. If not, I don't expect that will be a successful strategy. I expect that Canelo will be able to plant his feet and at some point land the shots that he's been able to land against most others, and probably put Charlo down and plod forward and really box on the inside in a way that Charlo's not going to be able to use the physical gifts that he has had at lower weight classes in the way that Jed has described. And that is a very clean and obvious route the path could take. But what if Canelo is diminished? What if the cliff is here? What if there is a diminishment? Now, is it 10%? And maybe he can still kind of do what he's done in the past? Is it 25%? That's the part I put more stock into and want to see the answer to. If you're asking me directly, is he catching him at the right time? I really don't know the answer, but that's the answer I'm most interested in finding out. I'm more interested in this fight from the perspective of, can Canelo prove that he is still the guy in a fight that is made for him to do that? This fight feels to me like an opportunity for him to say, look, I was trying that. Bivol was too big, and I just couldn't get it done. He kept me on the end of his jab, and I couldn't get it done. But it's been like that for the last couple of fights, and I really want to see what version of Canelo we get, and I don't know the answer, and that's what intrigues me so much about this fight, because I think Charlo is somebody who, if the answer is Canelo is diminished even slightly, can potentially take advantage of that, and that's why I'm intrigued by this fight.
Same question for you, Jed. Is Charlo catching Canelo at the right time?
So I think that it's very possible, but the reason I said that earlier, Rick, is I think I'm just coming from this from a different perspective of the Bivol fight. That fight to me looked very clearly like he's just not big enough to do this. Like he is simply out physically manned at that point in time. So don't take much away. And the Gennady trilogy, maybe not his best performance, but fine, and just sort of the circumstances there entirely. I did not watch John Ryder at the time I came to that in prep for this, and the entire narrative I had heard coming into this is, man, that Ryder fight was pretty bad. Like, he hurt him and really should have put the boots to him, and like maybe he's fallen off. And if he's fallen off, I won't be shocked. You said he's been doing this for a long time. Rick, he's been fighting for 18 years as a professional. He's 33 years old, by the way. It's a long time. He has 63 fights that we know about. And like, I'm willing to assume that the 63 is a low number because he was fighting, in Mexico for a bunch as a teenager. So they probably missed a few. Like, that is just an impossible amount of mileage. So like, absolutely could happen. The timelines are already redlined here. But when I went back and watched the Ryder fight, I came into it expecting to look bad. And he just clubbed Ryder around for a while. And my takeaway from that fight was much less, man, what's going on here? Like, is Canelo lost it? And it's like, man, freaking respect to John Ryder. Like, this dude just his nose is pouring blood. He at one moment looked like he was about to quit and then like steeled himself and came out and started putting it back at him. Like, I just left fight with a lot of respect for what John Ryder was capable of, and like his heart, and less, hey, Canelo might be falling off. So that's sort of my thought coming in here. And again, won't be super shocked if he does look a little slower. But again, I think that if this is, hey, who he's fighting, he's going to go back up. We're going to do the Bivol rematch. All right. I think he's not really maybe at his best anymore. I don't think that that's going to matter as much given the other advantages I feel that he has coming into this.
Yeah, to say even if he is diminished, it's not diminished enough where you feel that Charlo is posing as big a threat as he possibly could.
Exactly. Like if he's diminished, if you're going to be diminished, I would recommend to any professional fighter, fight dudes 2 weight classes below you. That's probably going to mitigate you being diminished to some extent. It's a great tactical choice.
Yeah. It is.
All right. So the moment of truth. Anything else you want to add, Eric?
I'm just going to say,
right.
I agree with that. I will say there's a bit of an element of sometimes we do make those justifications when the cliff is coming. And then when he finally falls off the cliff, we go, he fell off the cliff.
Oh, we should have seen it.
I'm curious. We should have seen it. It was there. And we kind of said, Bivol was too big, which, by the way, all of these things, I agree with every single takeaway you had. I came away from that fight saying Ryder is a stud, like is a tough
Ryder's
a
dog.
What a stud. But I also thought to myself, does he finish him 2 years ago? Does he get him out of there 2 years ago? And there's a part of me that I need to know the answer here. And I think we're going to get answers here, which is why I'm so excited about this fight. Because I really do believe if he is diminished in any capacity, I really think that Charlo is somebody who could take advantage of that. Like, he is so game. He's so good at adjustments. Again, the physical part of it is a factor, but I don't think it will be as huge a factor. So I'm very excited about this fight. And I think that it's a perfect bit of matchmaking, because to your point, like, look, if Canelo can style here, it's great. You got him in there against a guy where he has some advantages, and now he's back. And now those people that were saying, hey, is Canelo falling off, are going, he's back. He's here. And if Charlo's here, now you've got a superstar in the making, because I feel like he's got the complete package. So, man, I really like this fight, and I feel like it's flying under the radar for a lot of fans that might enjoy it as well.
Is Billy Joe Saunders a better fighter than John Ryder? It's tough.
That's a good question.
Anyway, what were you going to say, Jed?
Good question. I was going to say, I didn't mention this because I forgot about it, but I made a note of, I left that fight wondering a little bit about the John Ryder fight. If Mexico played a factor in this, like it was Canelo's first time fighting back in Mexico in like 20 years or some impossibly large number, and the weight of that expectation, because there was a period of that fight. It was after the knockdown, and it really looked like Canelo was turning it up, where I was like, oh yeah. And then he didn't. And I think that's the takeaway, but I don't know if that's just, hey, maybe less about does he have the physicality to do it anymore? Is he dropping off? And more, 10 years ago, he would have been reckless. He would have just been like, I'm just going to kill this dude. I'm in Mexico. I got to do this. And now he's a more refined, more disciplined fighter. And so he didn't sort of overextend himself in that way. So I just wanted to mention that, like, also maybe fighting in Mexico for the first time in 10 years is like substantively important to that performance and how that all shook out.
Question for both of you, a little trivia question. Can you name how many undisputed super middleweight champions there have been in the four belts era?
One. It's him, isn't it?
Eric?
That's the only one I know. Is that
one of
incorrect?
one? There is one of one. Canelo is the only one. So Eric, I'll ask you, will we see a new undisputed super middleweight champion in boxing, or is Canelo just add another scalp and move on to literally bigger fighters?
I'm getting really weird just feelings. Like, I don't know how to describe it. That I just can't. I'm picturing Charlo getting his hand raised, and I don't understand why. But the logical part of my brain just prevents me from thinking that will happen. And ultimately, I fight my instincts to say, no, like I expect that Canelo is going to be able to get on the inside. And at some point in the middle rounds, he's just going to turn up and Charlo is going to be there. And there's not going to be an opportunity for him to evade and escape. And Canelo is going to put him down. But there's a weird feeling around this fight. And I think it's almost like the fact that it's not being viewed, like it's the fact that it's flying under the radar, because this is the type of fight that all of a sudden, like we wake up one day and we're like, hey, Canelo lost. And it feels weird. So there's something happening and there's some kind of feeling I'm having. But when I look at the fights, I ultimately come away with the same conclusions that Jed kind of did. Like there is a justification for everything that we've seen from Canelo lately that I am attributing to it. And then this fight, and I'm like, yeah, he's coming up in weight, and I think Canelo has power that is going to carry, and there's an advantage that he's going to have when he's on the inside that I don't know that Charlo can overcome. So the logical part of me just says Canelo stoppage middle rounds. If it does go long, yeah, maybe there's a world where Charlo can win, but I have to side with Canelo until I see otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you. If people on this show remember when we had a meeting, I said that Bivol was probably going to beat Canelo, and a whole bunch of people laughed at me. I thought that was such an unshocking development in that fight, just the bigger fighter fighting Canelo. Charlo beating Canelo would feel strange, but I could very easily see it happening. It would feel strange, like Eric said, like waking up and be like, damn, Canelo lost? That's weird. Jed, what animal beats a lion?
A tuna.
There you go. Good answer. Anyway,
I would have absolutely loved had that happened, but it didn't, and it made me sad that nobody else that he didn't have that answer queued up. Can't blame him. I was like, yeah, tuna, obviously.
There you go. So, what is your official prediction for Canelo Charlo? Do we have a new champion, or does Canelo move on?
I think it's going to be a fun fight, but I think this is going to be a showcase for Canelo. I think Canelo is really set up here. If you dive into the stats a little bit, they really back that up even more. And that's obviously not taking into account, the weight advantages, et cetera. But pulled up a couple of stats here, and it's just Canelo lands more, throws more historically than Charlo. And I don't know if you guys know this. I'm pulling this stat out of my ass, and I could technically be wrong, but I'm going to say it's right. Man's never been knocked down. So I don't like, I'm just not like, I know how Charlo can win, but like, if you watch Charlo fight, a lot of his game really is dependent on hitting the shit out of people. And even if he does it, just like land clean. I'm not sure it's going to matter because Canelo is incredibly durable. And at some point, Charlo is going to get into some firefights and get hit. And I don't know that he can stand up in the same way that I'm confident Canelo can. And more to the point, I think Canelo all around is a better boxer. I think he's got a better jab. I think he works the body much more than Charlo does, and that will pay dividends as this fight goes on. I think Charlo is a really fun guy. All the stuff I went back and watched, he was very enjoyable to watch. I think he's going to make this fun because of who he is. But I think that this is an opportunity for Canelo to silence the admittedly pretty quiet, but there has been some doubt creeping up. I think he's going to silence that pretty effectively here.
The current odds, according to sportsbetting.ag, is Canelo is plus 450, Charlo plus 325. Agree or disagree quickly, both of you?
That sounds
right.
That seems in the range of where it should be. I think there's enough doubt.
Would you say minus 450?
Yeah.
It's 80% win probability is probably correct.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think there's enough doubt where it's not astronomical, where you're going to get a few people who are going to throw down on Charlo based on the recent performances. And then you're going to get the people who are just like, this is too much, the big stage. Like Canelo has literally fought on the big stage forever, and Charlo is coming up to the big stage now. And that's enough to really like be the foundation.
Biggest fight of his life by a lot, and not the
without
biggest fight
question.
of Canelo's not even close to the biggest fight of Canelo's career.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and Eric, you said you saw Canelo kind of putting him away in the middle, like late middle rounds. Though according to the odds, that is the betting favorite, 9-1 Canelo by TKO or KO or disqualification win between rounds 7 and 10. 28-1 for him to win by stoppage in the first 2 rounds, and 80-1 for Charlo to win in the first 2 rounds. And then his betting favorites are in the later rounds between 9 and 12.
I mean, I will say,
Yeah, that makes
Charlo can
sense.
be a little bit of a slow starter at times. So,
For sure.
like, is there a world where like Canelo just comes out and smokes it early? I mean, I could see that too. I don't think that that's completely off
for
the
sure.
table, if I'm being honest. Like, welcome to the big show, little man, and here's your receipt on the way out. Like,
yeah,
It's
there's
very
also a Jermell
possible.
Charlo
Dude,
by
that's-
first round KO is 100-1.
see that I'm not
Yeah,
so.
that's just never-
So,
that's
Yeah,
just
me
never
neither.
gonna
I'm like,
happen.
have fun with those odds.
I mean, Canelo in round 1 is plus 6,500, and that's like way more likely to me. It's just
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
yeah,
for sure.
It feels
I could
like a
absolutely
possibility. Yeah.
see that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
that's a really good point, Eric. Like he could start slow, and I want to see him take the first like big shot from Canelo. So if he holds up well, this fight's gonna rule. If he crumbles,
Yeah.
because Canelo is a very good big hitter and bigger, and this fight's gonna go very poorly for him very quickly.
Let's bring in Casey. Casey, you're on site. I know you've been pulling some questions. I do want to get your thoughts on the fight, but more specifically on what the interest level is there in Las Vegas, because you've covered some of the, like, obviously some of the biggest UFC, Bellator, MMA in general, and boxing all in Las Vegas. Where does this, I'm not going to ask you to rank them, but like, what's the general vibe down there compared to previous big fights you've been to?
Well, I was right before we started. I noted it, and I noted about 10 years ago, maybe not to the exact week. I was in the same room, around the same area, and I was here for the Mayweather Canelo fight. Outside of May Mac, that was the second biggest fight I've ever been live to. Well, Mayweather Pacquiao was right there too, but
That's pretty big.
Yeah, that was pretty big too. But
Considering that's the biggest fight of all time.
yeah. But, you know, I kind of forgot because the fight itself was, you know, whatever. But
Yeah.
But no, this how would I describe this? This is kind of like GSP versus, I don't know, Patrick Cote, kind of, where like it made sense at the time, and like, it was a big fight but it's more for the Canelo
Do you mean
side.
Anderson Silva, Patrick Cote?
Who? Oh no!
Do you mean
no,
Anderson Silva's had
sorry, sorry, they never fought. No, I was trying to think.
So
Anderson
definitely
Silva,
not GSP versus Patrick Cote in the battle for
Sorry.
Canada.
Sorry, I meant Anderson Silva. Sorry.
Yeah.
But in terms of like an all-time great, and this is just, I don't want to say like a mandatory, but everyone's excited about it. Like everyone expects, you know, they think Charlo's got a good chance and everything. They don't think this is just a trash matchup or anything as far as the boxing media. But in terms of just hype and everything, this feels as big as any UFC pay-per-view. Like, I mean, we're in the, you know, this is a big ballroom, and yesterday for the undercard press conference, there were like, it felt like 500 media members in here. It was wild, and like, this is something that MMA fans just didn't care about. And this is just for the prelims. And, you know, I know MMA fans, we don't really care about the prelims, but for boxing people, like they seem to be very excited about the whole card, or at least the whole main card. So I think from a
Dude, the
boxing
co-main's
standpoint,
dope.
yeah, it is. So from a boxing standpoint, this does feel like a very big weekend, a big fight for them. Yes, this isn't. What did Eric say? It doesn't really cross over into like mainstream, I think. But in terms of like kind of like Davis and Garcia did, or even the Crawford Spence. But in terms of just boxing, this is big, and it's cool to be here, honestly. And you've been to these events, Jose. Like, it's just boxing events. They have a completely different vibe. And one thing I found interesting too, outside of the little bit of Espinoza, Dana White kind of beefing a little bit, there's been like just no kind of talk about MMA or UFC kind of. It's like it's just boxing. There's no kind of, you know, like, oh, is Canelo gonna fight I don't know, Justin Gaethje next. There's none of that kind of talk. It's just pure boxing, and it's fun. I like it.
I think that honestly
You
speaks a
love to
lot
see
to
it.
like the. I think that speaks a lot to the respect that Canelo has earned in his career. Like the dude is box office. The dude is a superstar. The dude brings it every time, and like you can rely on him to carry a show. But also like boxing's in a good spot. Like I don't think it needs the MMA pull as much in terms of that crossover stuff. Like I don't think that like I'll be honest, like Canelo and Crawford is a more interesting fight to me than hearing about like Kamaru Usman wants to fight Canelo Alvarez or Canelo's, saying like I'll never like
Yeah,
I don't care
obviously.
about any of that crap. Like it's just the dumbest thing in the world. But I definitely interested in the idea of Terrence Crawford testing himself and trying to really put the number one
Crawford
pound for
Canelo's
pound label
gonna
on the
be
line.
sick.
Yeah,
But
that type
I
of
guess,
thing I feel like is
I guess that's what I
where
meant.
we need to be, and I feel like
Yeah.
boxing's in that spot.
Yeah, I was happy I wasn't hearing that kind of like.
Yeah.
It's so refreshing.
Like it wasn't. There was just no whispers of that. It was just pure. We're talking about Canelo. We're talking about Charlo, and that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
Boxing doesn't have
Canelo's
a little
also-
brother complex.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's true. That's very true. Canelo's also been historically over the last few years been very quick to shut down those talks when they're brought up. Like when someone asks about the Paul brothers, he just says, like he'll literally say like "shut up" and then just like continue on with the scrum. Same
As
for
he
all those
should.
guys. Yeah. Remember when he? I
As
think who
he
did he
should.
beat? Did he beat? It was the Billy Joe Saunders fight. Someone was wearing like a Paul brothers shirt, like in the ring. And it kicked him out of the ring, like while he's being interviewed live. You love to see it. Anyway, Casey, you've been compiling some questions. I know we've been going for a bit. Do we have any boxing questions from the MMA fighting?
Yes.
Chat.
Hold on a second. Actually, this I think.
Oh, that's an insult. I am not Jed Meshew, sir. What is it from Super Dave Fairtex? Good name. What is a similar upset in MMA if Charlo beats Canelo?
To kind of give it some sort of scale for MMA fans.
I like
Very
this
good
question. Let me
question.
think about it for a second.
It's not Strickland, is he?
See, the problem with this is we kind of my mind is instantly going to ones we've already seen, and that makes it harder because you're kind of assuming who the winner is.
I'm trying to pull a new one off.
Yeah, pull a new one because honestly, my mind, and I've been thinking about it, is like Silva versus Weidman. Like that is what felt like ahead.
Here's what
to
it
me.
is. Here's probably what I would go with, right? And it's not perfect, certainly in the stardom category, but like Volkanovski makes the most sense, right? Because Volk lost to Islam, and then we've talked about the pivotal fights. We have seen him lose, but it would be somebody coming up and taking it from Volk at bantamweight. So I would say Aljo, if Aljo hadn't just lost to O'Malley, if he had beaten O'Malley and come, that would have been clear. But now it's just like Cejudo Volk, maybe. Like if Cejudo randomly got a featherweight shot, that might be it. Something like that.
What about like Strickland Israel?
That one was shocking in the sense that if Strickland had just melted Israel, that would, like the narrative would have been like, oh, he just caught him, but like he like dominated for 25 minutes. That was more shocking to see, especially since the fight was all on the feet. Charlo beating Canelo would have been shocking to me.
Yeah.
I don't know, because is there a high level UFC champion right now that's people are asking, is he on the decline? Like that's kind of what I'm asking too. Is there a lighter weight
why I went
champion
to Israel,
that would go up to fight a
I would say is
That's why I went to Volk. I don't think anyone's asking it, but Volk's old.
So many.
The weight class.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one to do, knowing the outcomes.
I think this certainly, in hindsight, feels better. Grasso over Shevchenko. Like at the time, that was obviously an enormous upset, but
I like Grasso.
Kind of how we've seen that fold out. Like that makes more sense. What happened?
That's a good shout. Yeah,
I think that might be the
Valentina was
best
coming
one.
off the
Yeah,
top.
that's a
Yeah,
solid
because
one.
Valentina was coming off
Yeah.
the Tyler performance, and everyone that was the big like, is this the time to catch her? And then it did, and then they rematched, and she fought her to a draw. Good question.
I really
Good
like
answer.
that
Ross
one
was
I
because I
think that's a
also
good one.
felt
the top
at
Yeah.
that
pound for pound
time.
woman in the UFC's bantamweight rankings. Wow.
Yeah, I
I mean,
felt
this
I
one-
felt at the time a very similar feeling of like Alexa Grasso's skills were being undervalued, even though I thought Valentina
Yeah.
would win, and I feel similarly about this fight. So yeah, I
And
like that one a lot.
Alexa's also not the biggest flyweight. Like she was
Yeah.
a strawweight for most of her career, so
She was a
you
strawweight.
can throw that narrative in there. All right, that's the answer. Alexa's also Mexican. It kind of just feeds right into it. Well done, Jed. First
this-
and only time we'll ever hear that.
I'll clip it, frame it, put it, send the clip to the academy.
Yeah, I need
NFTs
clip that
are
so I can
NFTs
save
still
that.
a thing?
Sure, they're real cheap now too.
Yeah, sure.
This one's about boxing, but not about this fight in particular. But I think it's might as well talk about
Pro Fights Info. Is that Kazushi Okada in a Pirates hat? Sure is.
it. It is.
What do you want to see happen with boxing heavyweights if you could fantasy book the division for the next 2 years or so? ... So Eric, I'll start with you. We did before we went live. There were reports, confirmation, whatever you want to say, that Fury Usyk is going to fight for the undisputed heavyweight championships. We could possibly have. I always say possibly because draws are always possible, or the fight might not even happen. The Lennox Lewis was the last undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and you and I have talked about it. That like we want that in our lives again. So if you could fantasy book the heavyweight division quickly, what would you do?
I don't want to go 2 years because I just like heavyweight is a shit show and it's just impossible to go that far ahead. So I'll just go next fight. I think we need Joshua and Wilder. I think that fight needs to happen.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, I'm okay with Joshua and Zhang. I like that fight a lot too.
Love that too.
I think that would be a great fight. But Fury Usyk, obviously, and now that we're getting it, like great. Joshua Wilder winner fights Fury Usyk winner, and Bob's your nana. Obviously, I'm discounting Francis Ngannou as much as the promotion discounted Francis Ngannou when they booked Tyson Fury's next fight ahead of that fight happening. So yeah, that's the 4-man tournament I want to see. Obviously, there's other interesting heavyweights I think in Zhang, and I'd love to see Andy Ruiz kind of in the mix. And there's lots of other guys that I think could enter that convo. But those two matchups, I think, are the ones I want to see the most, and then pair that off winners fight winners. And if you can do Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury as the undisputed champion in Wembley Stadium, you're printing money. You're literally
like I
money.
said. Like I said, I
can't.
think last year, I said that last Casey, the clip's out there somewhere. I literally said Joshua Fury at Wembley Stadium prints money, and you have to literally add seats. That's the biggest fight you could possibly do in terms of revenue wise.
I don't want to shit on you, but don't want to shit on you, but people have been saying that fight prints money for like 8 years.
Oh, I'm not
So
saying
it's-
that's a new narrative. I'm saying
That's boxing,
when Fury when
that's-
Fury and Ngannou were when the talks. I think we had this conversation after the Dillian White Fury fight, and then Ngannou was there, and I was like, I don't give a fuck about Ngannou Fury. Like, give me Usyk versus all that, and then, but like, if you go back and watch that, everyone was like, oh, Francis Ngannou Tyson Fury. I'm like, I could give a shit. I honestly could give a shit. Still feel that way. Anyway, what do we got, Jed? Give me some heavyweight.
Francis
matchups.
knocks him out. Oh,
Sure.
It's easy, man. It's everything Rick said. You do Usyk Fury, you do Wilder Joshua, you do Zhang Ruiz because that's fun. The winner of Zhang Ruiz can fight the loser of Wilder Joshua. The winner of Joshua Wilder fights the winner of Usyk. Like, it's like child's play simple.
Yeah.
Because
Is
all
there
of this
anybody
it's just-
who would not be? Is there anybody who would not be interested in a Fury versus Wilder fight again? I personally am, but I'm just asking because of how many times we've seen it. I would watch that a million times. Is there anybody who would just
care.
be like,
I'll watch
it, but
Deontay Wilder
it's
fight
true.
anyone, but I don't care about
Yeah.
it. I've seen it. I know what's going to happen.
I don't know.
But, like, he's
I just want to know want to know what Andy Ruiz does next because for a long time I wanted to see
Yeah.
Andy Ruiz fight Dillian
Fight
White.
Zhang.
White's obviously on the shelf for a bit. Yeah, he could fight Zhang, but I kind of want
Fight Zhang. That's a
Zhang
fun
to
ass
fight.
fight.
I know.
I like
Yeah,
it.
that's fair. Let's do it. Why not?
Heavyweight kind of books itself now that things are shaking out. I feel like there was more murkiness,
Yeah.
more uncertainty a little while ago.
I
now
think
it's kind of just like all leading to.
The big issue with
Until-
boxing is there's these things called rematch clauses that just kind of throw and pause everything and mandatories and all that stuff. But like we just booked something that
And
made
UFC just
sense, but
chooses
all
to
of this
do that.
makes too much sense for boxing. You know,
I
like
will-
it's
I will
too
So now
easy,
it
acknowledge-
which
comes
means it
crashing
won't happen.
down.
Yeah.
I
When
acknowledge your
Ngannou
monkey
wins, it
wrench,
all comes
Jed.
crashing down.
I acknowledge
Anyway.
your Ngannou monkey wrench. I see. You.
I woke up this morning and saw the Usyk stuff, and I was like, "Oh my God, Fury's gonna get knocked out," because the best laid plans of
sure.
mice and men get ruined by chaos, not by logical reason, but by the dumbest thing possible.
From Azan Zaman, what did you think of the Tyson Fury disrespect to Ngannou? I'm assuming that's Fury booking the Usyk fight while he's already booked up with Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. Tyson Fury is typically smarter than this.
Yeah.
He's usually very good about promoting his opponents. He's usually very good, even in fights where I feel like people kind of know the outcomes, where he's like, look, here's why it's dangerous. Here's why I'm vulnerable. It's going to be a great fight. You need to tune in. And this one does, I have to admit, kind of feel like he's just putting Francis Ngannou on ice and being like, I'm moving on from this. I'm looking ahead to Usyk. And that's not usually how he operates, so I'm a little bit surprised. But it just I guess it feels like promotionally they needed to get this done for Saudi Arabia, and so I'm not going to complain about getting a heavyweight title unification between who I think are the two best at the moment. But I do feel like it is disrespectful to Ngannou. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a damn thing he can do about it because Tyson Fury is going to mop the floor with him. So I mean that's kind of what it is.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Truth isn't disrespect. Truth is just truth. Also, what does he care about promoting this thing? He already got the bag. Like the Saudis are paying him $1 billion. What does he give a shit? And probably based on John Fury, comments about Tyson, probably totally a coincidence. But it is funny that like a day after Tyson Fury's dad like rips Ngannou for sucking at boxing, like in that clip, it's like, okay, we'll go ahead and put the Usyk paper down. We're good on this. We don't have to concern ourselves. So, yeah, it's not disrespect. It's just honesty.
In a weird way, I feel like the disrespect is actually promotion in a unique way. Because I think if Tyson Fury came out and like, I'm training my best. This is the toughest matchup ever. I think we'd be kind of like, I think the fact that he's going all in on the disrespect. If
I lose, I'm going to get made fun of relentlessly.
Yeah.
To play devil's advocate. To play devil's advocate, though, like from a non-fight fan perspective, not necessarily like our perspective where we're going to watch these things anyway. If you're a non-fight fan and Tyson Fury is saying like, this is the appetizer, I'm blowing through this guy. When I fight Usyk, that's the real fight. That's the one I would buy if I didn't know better. I'd be like, okay, I don't really need to see. I don't really need to see the one before the final. That's the real fight. So I don't know if I'd plop down money for that. I think I'd probably skip it. But granted, we're a different.
I think the plan
different
is
class.
To,
I'm going
to
watch
allow it to. I think the plan is just to allow it to be the cultural moment thing of, hey, this is like a thing people are talking about, not this is a competitive fight that we give a shit about.
God bless. Hope it works.
But Connor,
dude, everybody already won. They already got the check cleared. Yeah. They're covered. They're fine.
They need to sell pay-per-views if they really want to make the bag. They need to actually, drive some kind of traffic.
It was
the promotion. They're doing
promotion. Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. I know that they're getting paid handsomely, but I think they want this to be successful from that perspective as well. The broadcast partners and everybody else who's buying into it.
Francis cares more about that than Tyson does.
Yeah, he should. He really should.
He should, and he absolutely should. But Tyson can be like, I'm focused on the Usyk because that's the thing that's going to do a lot of pay-per-views. It's going to be great, and I also get Saudi money with that. So hell yeah.
We got one more, Casey, or I know we're coming up on time right now. That's a wrap. So thank you, everyone, for joining our boxing preview show. I always enjoy doing these with these fine gentlemen. Casey's on site. You can go to MMAfighting.com for all of our face-offs, press conferences, and everything. You can listen to Jed on No Bets Barred and Damn They Were Good and all of our other BTL preview shows and post shows that he's on, and you'll see New York Ric on the MMA Hour every Mondays and Wednesdays. So, and
sometimes hosting.
Sometimes, and every now and then, I appear from out of the woods and you see me, which is a rare occurrence. But until we see you again, we out.
Love y'all.